This is Barry Zalma speaking for Claim School Incorporated with another true crime of insurance fraud video. This one, number 79, entitled The Sweet Little Old Lady and Why Insurance Fraud is an Equal Opportunity Crime. The insured was 82 years old and bored. She was born shortly after the turn of the century, the 20th century, to a wealthy family of Connecticut merchants. She had been a debutante. She lived most of her life in luxury. Now at 82, she was a widow living alone. She had a small income from her husband's estate and 82 years' worth of things. The things bored her. Living alone bored her. Simply passing the days caused her nothing but unexplainable exhaustion. Her life needed something to keep her interest. The insured, regardless of her age, had a fine and steady hand. Her penmanship was, in these days of computers, exotic. She recalled that shortly before World War II, she and her husband lived in New York City and got an appraisal on all of their fine things by Leo McCarthy, the foremost art appraiser of the pre-war years. She found the appraisal after some searching in an old trunk. It was written on sheets of 11.5 by 14-inch artist's vellum. A pen and ink drawing illustrated each line of fine descriptive script on the appraisal. She took one sheet to the local stationery store and had them order a pad of 50 sheets of similar paper. When the paper arrived, she sat at the kitchen table for weeks, meticulously copying with a fountain pen each sheet of McCarthy's work. The line drawings she traced lightly with a very soft pencil and then drew over the pencil lines in ink. She only changed the values to reflect what she believed to be modern prices. She cautiously erased all the pencil lines with a soft gum eraser. Each page was a masterful copy, as ably illustrated as any Bible page illustrated by a medieval friar. After completing the copies, now that she was familiar with McCarthy's style, she began to describe the things she had in her home. She described a needlepoint pillow she had made the year before as an antique design handmade in the south of France in the 17th century. A porcelain creamer that she bought at J.C. Penney became a Meissen porcelain figurine from the early 19th century. She described a landscape print she bought at a garage sale as an Andrew Wythe oil signed by the artist in 1932. When she was done, she had 20 sheets listing 130 items with a total value of $275,000. She signed Mr. McCarthy's name to each sheet and dated it with a date 1 year earlier. The copy of McCarthy's style and penmanship was masterful. The 20 pages of appraisals she had created were a work of art. She felt a need to put the art to work. The original McCarthy appraisal had been the basis for an insurance policy that had lapsed more than 50 years earlier. The insured concluded that a reasonable use for her artful forgery would be to get a policy of insurance. On a fine Tuesday afternoon, she dressed in a long black dress, reaching to her ankles and buttoned high on her neck. She tied her pure white hair in a tight bun at the top of her head. She picked up her cane and walked out of her home briskly into the Southern California sun. She walked 2 blocks into a storefront insurance agency, introduced herself, and said, "Young man, can you get insurance for my fine art?" "Of course, madam, but you must first have an appraisal." "I knew you would ask, and had my friend Mr. McCarthy prepare an appraisal." She then handed the agent the appraisal she had forged, impressed by its detail. the line drawings and the obvious literacy of the author, the agent said, "The values you have on this appraisal are higher than my normal markets will accept. I must submit them to other markets for you, but to do so I need a signed application." The insured agreed and answered honestly questions concerning her residence, her loss history, she had none, her insurance industry, she had last been insured 50 years before. She then signed the application the agent put before her. The agent submitted the application and a copy of the appraisal to a Lloyd's correspondent with whom he was familiar. The Lloyd's correspondent forwarded the appraisals and application to a London broker who submitted it to certain underwriters at Lloyd's in London. The risk seemed a good one. The appraisal was more professional than that which underwriters had come to expect from the United States. Lloyd's quoted a 3% rate that the insured accepted. The policy was issued. No one asked before issuance to look at the fine arts. No one visited the insured's home. The insurance broker and the insurers accepted her representations in good faith. Excited by the ease with which she had obtained a policy, she decided to put her forgery to the test. She would claim that all of the items insured, very few of which existed, were stolen. She did not consider the act criminal. She saw it as a means to relieve boredom. Even if caught, she knew that no one would prosecute a sweet little old lady who, as a widow, lived alone. 30 days after delivery of the certificate of insurance to the insured, she telephoned her broker and said, "I am so embarrassed. I've been burglarized." The agent responded with sympathy. "Being burglarized is nothing to be ashamed of. It happens every day. That's why you bought insurance. What was taken?" "Everything. All my fine things. They are all gone." After reassuring her, the agent immediately called his correspondent, who reported to the London broker, who reported to the Lloyd's underwriters, who directed a local adjuster to investigate the claim. When the adjuster arrived at the insured's home, he found minimal furniture in relatively poor condition. He found the insured to be a pleasant old lady who stood only 5 foot 1 inches tall. She was thin and frail. She looked like she could not have weighed more than 90 pounds. He felt that if he had inadvertently sneezed in her presence, he would knock her to the ground. She offered him tea and cookies. She was gracious. She answered all questions he posed to her. She seemed to enjoy retelling the story of the burglary. Her voice, a faint contralto, cracked with emotion as she came to the moments before the loss. She said, "I had hired a lady from El Salvador to help me clean my silver. It's just too big a job for me now that I'm 82. Her name was Juanita. I don't know her last name. I believe her number and name was on a card on the bulletin board at the Ralph's grocery store. Juanita and I had been cleaning the silver for about an hour, using very strong ammonia, when the fumes began to bother me and I became faint. I really don't know what happened, but the next thing I remember, I was waking up on the kitchen floor. Juanita was gone. My silver was gone. All my artwork and porcelain was gone. I trusted that woman. I fed her. She broke bread with me and then robbed me when I was incapacitated by the fumes. Imagine that." The adjuster believed her. She was obviously so honest. She looked him straight in the eye and answered every question. Upset at the calumny of the El Salvadorian domestic, the adjuster wanted to help. He promised to complete his investigation rapidly. He would make sure her claim was paid as promptly as possible. The adjuster had been well trained. He knew that Lloyd's underwriters expected him to verify the appraisal with Mr. McCarthy. He knew that they also required that the claims handler verify the values of the things claimed stolen. He began his investigation. The insured had told him that McCarthy's office was in New York. He immediately dialed the information office in New York, seeking the offices of Leo McCarthy Appraisal. There was no listing. He contacted a local art appraiser who, impressed by the detail of the appraisal, wanted to meet McCarthy. The appraiser, however, had never heard of McCarthy. She searched the list of the American Association of Art Appraisers and did not find his name. She called several firms. McCarthy was unknown. She called an appraiser she knew in New York and asked if he had ever heard of an appraiser by the name of Leo McCarthy. He replied, "Of course, a dear man, one of the finest art appraisers who ever lived." "Where can I find him? A friend needs to speak to him about an appraisal he did." "Well, that will be difficult." "Why?" "Because, my dear, he died on Midway Island in 1943. The insured had made only one mistake. She had used the signature of an appraiser long dead. Underwriters, of course, instructed the adjuster to deny the claim for fraud. They further instructed the adjuster, because of the insured's advanced age, not to report the attempted fraud to the police or the Bureau of Fraudulent Claims. A month later, a lawyer called to inquire about a potential settlement. He implied that it would not be wise for an insurer to litigate against a poor little old lady. The adjuster merely repeated the denial and asked that before counsel filed the lawsuit, that he determine the date of McCarthy's death and the location of his coffin. He explained to the lawyer that it is difficult for a man who died in 1943 to sign a fine arts appraisal in 2019. The lawyer did not file suit. He confronted the insured, who without hesitation told him the truth. The lawyer withdrew his representation and refused to have anything further to do with the little old lady. A fraud was thwarted. The insured put some excitement into the dull life of an 82-year-old widow. Little harm was done, and the adjuster has a story about a fraudulent claim that will top that of all his contemporaries. Because they rescinded the policy, Lloyd's returned the premium. Everyone should understand that people from every level of society, every race, creed, age, group, or country of origin commit insurance fraud. No one looks like a fraud. The most innocent looking, like the insured, will present a fraudulent claim with impunity, while the most criminal looking ex-convicts will present an honest claim. Insurers must, to conduct a thorough investigation without bias, stop the criminal actions of sweet little old ladies and or hardened criminals equally. If not, crime will succeed, the innocent ex-convict will lose the indemnity to which he is entitled, and the criminal grandmother will recover, and everyone who buys insurance will pay more than they should. This video was adapted from my book, Insurance Fraud, Volume 2, from my book, Insurance Fraud Hurts Everyone, and from the treatise, Insurance Fraud in 2 volumes, all of which are available as Kindle books and paperbacks from Amazon.com. Thank you for your attention, and if you viewed this video on Rumble, please click on the Rumble button, and if you viewed it on YouTube, please click on the like button.